If I learned one thing in architecture school, it's that I didn't want to be an architect. But if I learned a second thing, it's the importance of always documenting my work. Pics, or it didn't happen. When I try to tell people about my hobby, I end up awkwardly scrolling through the Photos app on my phone. I'd much rather have one centralized place where my entire portfolio of work is available. That was the idea when I started my Instagram, but since then it's become dominated by low effort, sort of work in progress posts. After a year of painting minis, I feel like I really have nothing to show for it. See, that title isn't clickbait. I have a big to-do list if I want to get this fixed. Number 1, I want it to be easy to take photos. So ideally, for me, that means a permanent photo set. Now, this isn't a very big studio. If you look around, this is about all there is to it. I need to find a place to fit a set, and the only thing I can think of is that shelf right over there. It's a pretty small space. Number 2, I want to fill my grid with high quality and consistent photos. So I'm gonna have to take practically my entire backlog all at the same time in order to do that. This is turning into a really big project. Number 3, I never finish 2 of my projects, so I need to get over my perfectionism and just get them across the finish line before I can post photos of them online. Before we tackle that to-do list, let me show you a few miniatures that won't be making it onto my Instagram. These are the first ever minis I painted, and they're for your eyes only. Please, keep them a secret. Promise? Promise? Oh boy. Here are my daemonettes of Slaanesh, and these are the first minis I ever painted. In fact, this is the first miniature I ever painted. Ain't she cute? I bought these back in 2022 while I was still in grad school. I was really into the idea of having a Slaanesh army. There's such a contrast to everything else in the setting, and I was in the middle of a big purple phase. I bought probably 1,000 points of Slaanesh over the course of a couple months, but I only ever painted these 7 models. I was working 60 hours a week between grad school and a half-time job. I really didn't get far on these, and by the time I graduated, I just decided to sell everything that I had and keep what I'd already painted. I had this idea of the daemonettes corrupting the ground as they walked. I ended up using actual amethyst and then got discouraged when I learned that those would sun fade to a clear crystal over time. Don't get me wrong, this idea still slaps, but if I were to do it again, I would 3D print the crystals and then paint them purple. Sometimes the real thing just isn't real enough to look right at a miniature scale. I really don't think I would have enjoyed this army. It's very niche, very little model diversity in 40k especially, and it doesn't match my preferred playstyle. Maybe the AOS one would suit me better. No promises. My next little Warhammer obsession came about a year later as I was out of school and searching for a full-time job. Hot tip, don't try to get into Warhammer when you're unemployed. I still had most of my hobby tools, but I didn't have any new models that I could paint. I got sparked by this idea of doing cel-shaded orcs based on some tutorials I saw from Thunderbrush Studios. At the time, I also discovered the Def Squadron comics, which are these old school orc comics that are all black and white, just line work in ink. They're really gorgeous. I wanted to bring those styles together and see if I could do that into a miniature. I bought a cheap lot of random orcs off eBay, and I made a few practice attempts. This knob was the only result I felt was worth keeping. Definitely a sloppy boy, but it got me into orcs for the first time. And if I hadn't done this project, it's likely I wouldn't have gotten into Warhammer a year later when I actually started. Now skip forward to just a year ago. I was finally getting settled in a full-time job, and I was looking for something to do with my free time. I had fallen off with a couple other hobbies, and the idea of playing Warhammer was honestly really considered for me. I was worried that it would be too demanding on my time and budget, which it can be if you let it, especially if you start a YouTube channel and a Twitch stream. Not sure why I'm doing that, but here we are. I've always been interested by collections, but specifically ones where little parts come together to create a greater whole. Just having a high quantity of one thing on display to me is not as interesting as having a bunch of little units and models that come together to form an army. Kind of like that one Transformer that's made up of like 5 other Transformers. Or like a Barbie with all her accessories. I knew I liked strategy games and board games. I knew I liked working with my hands. I'd tried building a lot of model kits when I was a kid, but never really finished any of them. Warhammer is all those things wrapped up in one, so I decided to give it a shot. I looked up my local game store, and it turned out they were running a league for Warcry in just a month. Warcry, for those who don't know, is the skirmish game in AOS, kind of like Kill Team is the skirmish game for 40k. If you've never played any tabletop before, Warcry is actually a great place to start. It's got pre-built armies, or you can make your own. AOS miniatures are beautiful, and I think the rule sets that they put out for Age of Sigmar are really a cut above what's currently available in 40k, so give it a shot if you haven't. I looked through the available options for armies, and Corvus Cabal instantly stood out to me. See, I've always really liked Corvids, crows and ravens, blue jays as well, although they don't feel as much a Corvid as a Gractyl does, even though Gractyls aren't Corvids. A little bit of secret lore, the reason I'm named Spackle Gractyl is because I loved Gractyls as a kid, and I thought they were crows. I know better now, but I still think they're kinda crows. If I ever start playing Raven Guard, you'll know why. Or Ravenwing for that matter. I feel like Ravenwing is cooler, they have bikes. I might just need to put both of them together. Call them Raven Wing Guard. I don't know. Here's another fun lore drop. I painted these with an airbrush and oil paints. See, I found Marco Frazzoni's tutorials and I really dig his approach to speed painting specifically. Purple from underneath, blue up top, and then a big oil wash to darken everything down into black in the shadows. I didn't have a lot of skin tone paints available at this time, so I used like whites and blues and tried to get close to a skin tone by myself, and I ended up with like this chalky war paint sort of look, which honestly works really well for the Cabal. I especially love the freehand white feather tips that are in the box art for these, and I emulated that in a much simpler way on my own. I use these to signify rank, and I put more white tips on the more elite warriors and especially the leaders. In my head, the Shrike Talon, who has this big coat made of them, is really just being bestowed an artifact from the Cabal, where the Cabal leader, she has just a personal collection that's much less functional and is therefore more prestigious. That's how I justify it to myself, at least. Pretty much everyone who plays thinks that the Shrike Talon is the leader and not the Shadow Piercer. It's really kind of funny. Major doesn't always mean in charge, unless you're an orc. Then it means you're in charge. Around this time, I started eyeing 40k, and I was really getting interested in Votann. They were still the new kids on the block, and I really loved the look of their technology specifically, even though now I realize I don't love the foot troops as much, or the lore as much for that matter. But I saw this really cool illustration of a Hecaton land fortress that someone had done a cross-section of to try and show what was inside. And that inspired me to want to make one of these in a miniature format. I didn't want to go full out on a land fortress, so I started smaller with the Sagittar, and I bought some Hearthkin warriors to fill out the crew compartment. This project is how I learned that vehicles are scaled differently than troops in 40k. There was no way in hell I could fit 6 Hearthkin warriors inside of the Sagittar, even though the rules say it could fit that many. Instead, I settled for having 1 on the exit ramp, and I still modeled the full interior in there, even though you can't see it because I broke the light kit that I installed into the thing. Honestly, putting a light inside of a miniature like this could be a really great effect, but it's so much work and fuss, and it's like almost impossible to hit the button. Suffice to say, I would do this a little differently in the future if I even decide to go into this level of detail for an interior compartment. Maybe the switch should be on the bottom, even if it looks weird. When I needed a break from the Sagittar because it was a very ambitious single miniature project, the hardest thing I'd ever painted up to that point, I decided to paint some Orkboys. See, I still had quite a few left over from that lot where I'd gotten the cell-shaded knob, and I wanted to try a more grimdark painting style. I just did green for the skin, gray for the clothes, kind of a dark green on the pants. Everything was very literally colored. And then I oil washed over the top, and honestly the result's pretty good for battle ready. This is also where I learned that I really liked doing freehand checkerboards. I know, I'm weird, but the results were still pretty great for especially not a lot of work. I did go back later and experiment with skin tones on a few of these, so these are the ones that have the brighter, more pistachio green skin, which is a color scheme I love way more for goths. It provides a nice contrast between their skin and their armor that gives them a nice pop on the table. If I was painting something like Bad Moons, which I very well may paint Bad Moons in the future, I would go for a more sallow skin tone to make the yellow pop out, but with goths everything is so dark you have to have the green skin pop, otherwise they're just gonna look like a blob of dirt. These days I'm painting in a much cleaner style, heavily inspired by Tabletop Ready's orc tutorials, because the work that they put together is just so crisp and clean, and then they add battle damage on later to get these really great gritty effects. Anyway, I'm just gonna keep experimenting with my orcs until I find a style that I really like. I have painted some more orcs since these boys, but I'm gonna save those for a future video because I'm about to paint like 1,000 points of my orcs up to battle ready, hopefully for a tournament that starts in 2 weeks. Good lord, that's gonna be a tall order. Since I couldn't build the interior of my Sagittar to scale, I ended up with a bunch of extra Hearthkin warriors laying around. I'd also purchased a bunch of random bits off eBay which just happened to include the upgrade sprue for turning them into the Hearthkin Salvagers kill team. Then my local shop announced they were doing kill team. So you can see where this is going. Remember those projects I said I never finished? This is the first of them. In order to finish these, they were just missing a few details. First and foremost, everyone needed their decals. I do a number on the right shoulder pad and their league symbol on the left shoulder pad, almost like football players. Time to admire my work. And where's the number? Where'd the number go? Hello? Oh, it's on my hand. Okay. So I put the number on. Finally, this one's done. I can put it down and pick up my next mini. This one's cool. She's the leader of the pack, and so she gets to be number 1. And because I only had 9 of the black symbols, she's going to get a special one to make her stand out even more. The exact details that I just put on one of my random gunners by mistake. Crap. This experience of getting these decals on made me want to buy Mitrosol, but if I had bought Mitrosol, then I wouldn't have been able to switch these decals over to the proper kindred, now would I? Anywho, I'm not going to make you sit through me fussing with decals for 20 minutes. Montage time. Plasma weapons need their blue glow. I painted a few plasma weapons metallic, not realizing that they were supposed to be plasma, and plasma looks cool, so of course I'm gonna jump on the opportunity to add that in. These just need a white undercoat and then a layer of turquoise on top to make the color really pop. I try to wet blend in a little bit of white to give some modulation in the tone of the blue, but honestly, I don't really understand this technique, so I'm just gonna stick with blue and leave that for another day. This rocket launcher needed more contrast on the tip. For some reason, I just left the entire weapon orange, which looks a little silly. Leather pouches on this one needed a darker wash, so I take care of that. The jump troop has a wire attaching them to the base, which is supposed to be painted black, and I just never remembered to do that. I prefer this somehow to them just standing on rocks. I don't actually know if it looks better, it's just a thing I've been trying. Then finally, everyone gets a coat of varnish off camera to lock in those changes and make sure the decals don't fly off again. I kept these in the same style as my Sagittar. It's very similar to the box art for Trans-Hyperion Alliance, but ever so slightly worse in that the weapons aren't a different color. I really should have copied that too. I decided to go with a very dark base this time to give a lot of contrast with the bright orange armor. I found this hexagonal stone pattern, which is modeled after basalt columns in the real world, and I felt this was perfect for the kindred. It gives sort of a sense of order and discipline to the natural world that really reflects how ordered and disciplined the troops that are walking on it are. Plus, hexagons are the bastions and they just look cool. I tried to model that the more static troops would be perched up on more rocks or taller rocks, with the exception of the jump back troop who is jumping off of rocks. And then the more mobile ones have more of a mix of ground texture as if they're on sort of the outskirts of this basalt outcropping. That intent might not show through to you just looking at these, but the contrast does help them look more naturalistic because it means not every base is going to be the same. Will I paint more Votann in the future? Probably not. I'm not really sparked by this army as much anymore, and I'm thoroughly enjoying orks. Plus, I'm not some cowardly git that just wants to stand behind cover and shoot ya. I want to get up in the action, get stuck in, just like Dork intended. Did I mention my LGS also does a Spearhead League, and that I had randomly gotten a Dominion box as a door prize at one point? That worked out pretty well. But I have a choice to make. Am I going to play Stormboyz? Stormboyz. Stormboyz. I'm orc-brained, I'm orc-built. Am I gonna play Stormcast Eternals or Kruleboyz? Naturally, I choose Kruleboyz, just as Mork intended. I tried following a Marco Frazzoni tutorial for these again, using layered inks to build up quick and detailed skin tones without a lot of manual work or highlighting. This is a great speed paint result. I still like something about the pistachio skin a little bit more, but for these Kruleboyz, honestly, this different skin tone works totally great. Most of the work here is just putting various leather tones down to make it look like they've strapped their clothes together out of just whatever they've killed. For the shields, it's hard to tell if these are supposed to be squigs or if they're supposed to be metal that just looks like squigs. I very much went for metal that looks like squigs. To me, these are grotesques that they make out of their more precious copper in order to show rank and dominance and scare their opponents on the battlefield. So naturally, everyone has at least a little piece of this, but the leaders get even more copper. The one detail I wasn't pleased with the first time around was the skin on this great Gnashtooth. I underpainted it blue and purple to give a nice contrast from the rider, but I never came back to turn this into real skin tone. I kinda got stuck in decision paralysis as far as how to paint the skin or what colors it should actually be. I learned recently that a lot of animals have a lighter underbelly, and that gave me the spark I needed to push this across the finish line. So I went with dark purples mixed in with dark skin tones in order to create this hide. Then the underbelly gets lighter pink skin tones mixed in with lighter skin tones, and then they get blended together a little bit in the middle. I added some quick highlights to some of the ridges and folds in the skin, and really just called it there. This is a very quick and dirty paint job, but I think it lines up well with the overall quality of the rest of the pieces in this army. I think I can work cleaner in this, but at least it's tabletop ready now, and it isn't such an obvious mistake. It's hard to know when to put a project like this down. On one hand, perfectionism is an impossible goal, but it's still a noble pursuit. I want to live by the ideal that once a miniature goes in my cabinet and it's done, it stays done, and I don't go back and retouch it. See, going back constantly to touch up old work not only wastes a lot of time, it also risks painting over a lot of my history in this hobby. On the other hand, if I put these back in the cabinet without fixing these final little details, could I really be happy with them? In these cases, no, I couldn't be, and that's why I decided to take them out and put them through just those last little details to get them across the finish line. Despite the wisdom I'm trying to portray here, I still struggle with perfectionism. Did you know I remade that original video 3 times before I released it? See, the first time I recorded this A-roll, my mic sounded terrible. It was constantly clipping out. I'd had my settings dialed in wrong as I'd been streaming, and just no one ever pointed it out to me. It wasn't until I was listening back that I realized how bad the issue was. So I completely changed all of my mic settings and tried again. And that second video still sucked. I was getting less of the clipping issue, but it was still present and my voice sounded distorted and harsh. The third time, the audio was much better, but I was rushing through the script and the energy and pacing just wasn't there. Some of the blemishes of that original video, the Nico interruptions, the ad-libbed line reads, they were things I couldn't recreate. So I ended up keeping the second version, and that's what I posted on YouTube. Hey Nico, we're just talking about you. Despite a room for improvement, that first video exceeded all expectations. Like, you guys gave it like 12,000 views, 1,000 likes. I got like 800 subscribers off of one YouTube video. That is wild. I was hoping that like a few hundred people would watch it. Y'all have been so kind to me with that first video. I'm struggling to find the words, but from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for being here. I'd really appreciate it if you could give this video a like as well and subscribe if you haven't. I'm trying to reach 1,000 so I can monetize this channel. I think that would be really cool to do after just like 2 videos, like dream scenario. So please, if you like the video, help me out. I'd appreciate it. All right, but enough of that serious stuff. I haven't photographed any minis and I still need to build a set, so let's get to that. Here is my studio. I do all my streams and record all my videos here. I don't really have a large studio space. This is the whole thing. I split the office with my fiance. I have this desk space right here, half a bookshelf and half a closet that's all spackle-dractyl. I'm gonna put my photo set right here, right on this little shelf. Hey, look, we're cutting down boards again. I'm building an elevated scenery platform to fit over this turntable. That way I can use the same set for 360s and stills. This construction's really nothing fancy, it's just cutting square boards and gluing them together, so enjoy this montage. With all that done, it is paint time. First off, I base coat everything black. That means if I miss anything in the future, it'll just look like a dark shadow. This is craft paint I've had for a few years and it's getting really thick. I mean, I can shake the bottle upside down and it doesn't come out. Like, it's really thick. I had to scoop it out with a brush and add pretty much an equal amount of water just to get it to a workable consistency. At least I'm using up supplies I already had on hand, but if I do a bigger project, I imagine I'm going to be buying new paint for that. I heard a tip online that painting boards like this on both sides can prevent warping. Definitely did not entirely prevent warping, but putting a weight on top while it was drying sure prevented warping. To add some texture, I'm first using this pumice medium. This is used to add texture and body to acrylic paint. It's a really cheap way to get a lot of texture material, great for dioramas. I found in this process it was easier to apply when it was mixed in with some paint, so I'll keep that in mind for future efforts. I follow up with a fine grain texture from Monument Hobbies. This is more expensive, so I use it sparingly. I did decide to put it all over the turntable though, that way no matter what orientation the turntable is in, it'll still look like roughly the same ground texture. After letting the glue dry the first time, I decided to add these skirts to the front and back of the board. This will give it a little bit more of a clean finished look, and if I catch the front of the board in a photo, you won't be able to see all the mess underneath it. Once all the texture was dry, all I gotta do now is make the dirt brown. I added a coat of brown from another well-aged craft paint. This time, it was my fiance's, so I ended up replacing the tube at the end. I also mixed together some other craft paints to get other brown tones just to give a nice variety, and patched that in throughout the painting, wet blending it to make everything look smooth. I just need a little stripe of black across the front of the skirt, and that's painting done. I had this idea of painting up a ton of terrain to go along with these photos, but after this first one, you'll see I ran out of time. Long story short, I found a paint scheme I really liked for this Vulcus terrain, and it takes forever to do. I spent a couple hours at the desk and 3 more hours on Twitch just to paint this wall alone. If you want to see me paint live and hang out, you can come over to my Twitch. I try to stream at least once a week. Right now, it's every Tuesday night at about 7 Eastern, 6 Central. See, where I got myself in trouble here is I picked out all these structural members in a dark metallic sort of color. It looks stunning, but it takes hours to do. If I paint everything to match this level of quality, I would never get this video out. So I'm just gonna stick with this one and try to go terrainless for the rest of my photos. Speaking of, let's move on to those photos. I'm using this black trifold display board for my black backdrop. I originally wanted black velvet like they'd use in a movie theater because that would absorb light really well. Unfortunately, with Joann's closing, there's not a lot of options to get fabric around me, so I just went with a black display board. This still diffuses light in a pleasant way, so I'm not too worried about the effect on my photos, even if it's not as dark as I wanted it to be. I also purchased these miniature video lights, which I can use for mobile filming or integrate into my stream setup, which I actually already added one right here to this camera, which is really nice for getting close-up shots on miniatures, I'm finding. Now all that's left is taking the photographs. These are all up on my Instagram right now, so check the link in the description if you want to see them over there. I know not everyone likes jumping platforms, so I'll also be reposting them over here on YouTube over the coming days after the video comes out. But with all that preamble out of the way, it's time to enjoy a cool photo slideshow. Oh hey, you're still here. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna rush to get this edited now. Oh, say goodbye, Nico. And we'll see you in the next one, hopefully soon. I'm aiming to get things out in the middle of the month, and it's already nearly the end of September, so I'm gonna jump on the next one right away. Again, just wanted to say thank you for the great reception of the first video. Nico showing his kindness in the only way he knows how. And Yeah, I'm aiming to post these things about every month. I know I'm a little bit behind with this one, but if you want to see future videos, please just subscribe and stick around. I'm really looking forward to making more videos for all you folks. All right, till next time, I gotta go finish editing this thing. Fractal out. You go out. Goofball.